Emily Taus was no stranger to struggle. The loud blare of her alarm clock at 5 a.m. pierced through the stillness of her modest studio apartment in Queens, the only sound that could break the quiet night. As she groggily reached for the clock, her tired eyes skimmed the cracked ceiling above, a constant reminder of her life, one that felt stagnant, almost like the peeling paint on the walls. Shadows danced from the streetlights outside, almost as if ghosts were visiting, their fleeting presence reminding her that life had never really felt like hers. Exhaling deeply, Emily forced herself to get out of bed. The same routine, the same struggles, but today, like every day, she whispered her grandmother's mantra in both Spanish and English. One step forward, one day at a time. Despite everything, her worn-out apartment, the ice-cold water in the bathroom, the crumbling life she tried so hard to piece together, she believed just one step forward. By 6:30 a.m., she was clocking in at the Atoria Grand Hotel, a grand five-star luxury establishment in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a place that felt so out of reach, yet Emily found herself cleaning its floors day after day. Her name tag read, Housekeeping Emily, a title she had come to accept without question. Today, she would clean the fifth-floor rooms, the hallways, the executive lounge. If the breakfast buffet was short-staffed, she would help there too. She moved fast, focused, and invisible, just the way they liked her. But Emily wasn't who she seemed. Beneath her humble job was a mind that had spent years working hard to earn a degree in foreign languages from Hunter College. She was at the top of her class, with honors, fluent in English, French, German, and most recently Dutch. It had been Dutch that had captured her heart, a language she'd fallen in love with after a visiting lecturer from Amsterdam had come to her college. They had kept in touch, and he had continued to mentor her, encouraging her to pursue her passion for languages even as life threw her curveballs. Life had other plans, though. After her mother's illness drained all their savings, Emily found herself drowning in debt. The burden was too much to bear alone, and when her mother passed away, Emily had no choice but to take the first job she could find, housekeeping at the Atoria Grand Hotel. But she never stopped studying. Every evening after work, she rode the Q-Line subway to the public library in Brooklyn. There, she used the free computers to practice Dutch grammar exercises and vocabulary drills, always holding on to the hope that one day she could use her education for something more meaningful. Despite the challenges, Emily never gave up on her dreams. But this morning felt different. As she worked near the penthouse suite, dusting and making the hallway shine, something caught her attention. The rhythmic click of sharp footsteps on the polished floors alerted her to the presence of three men in suits, walking briskly past her. One of them stood out, and Emily couldn't help but notice him. He was tall, dark-haired with silver streaks at his temples, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that exuded authority. He was Ethan Morgan, the CEO of Morgan Lux Holdings, the billionaire who owned the hotel. Emily had heard whispers about him in the halls, stories of his rise from poverty, his obsession with perfection, and his legendary silence when walking through the corridors. He was almost mythic, a figure everyone knew but few had seen. Ethan barely glanced at her, or so she thought, but as he passed, Emily felt an inexplicable tension in the air. It was a fleeting moment, but something about him left her breathless. As she continued her work, she dismissed the thought, telling herself it was just another day, another random encounter with someone she'd never see again. But it wasn't. Later that day, during her lunch break, Emily sat alone in the staff lounge, reheating rice and beans from her Tupperware. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and when she checked it, she saw a message from her Dutch mentor, Dr. Peter van Linden. "You passed your certification. Call me when you can." Her heart leapt into her throat as she dialed his number. "Did I really pass?" she asked, almost breathless. "Not only passed, Emily," Peter responded with a laugh in his voice. "You aced it. You're officially certified at a professional fluency level in Dutch." Emily couldn't stop smiling. Her eyes filled with tears as she allowed herself a moment to celebrate. Years of early mornings, late nights, and studying during the few free moments she had at work had paid off. She had done it. She had achieved something that felt like it was finally within her grasp. As she was still talking to Peter in Dutch, laughing at her good news, the door to the lounge creaked open behind her. She turned to see none other than Ethan Morgan standing there, watching her with quiet curiosity. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his voice calm but firm. He stepped further into the room. "Were you speaking Dutch?" Caught off guard, Emily scrambled to end the call, her face flushed. "Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I was on break." "It's fine," he interrupted, his gaze steady. "Where did you learn it?" Emily, still nervous, avoided his gaze. "I studied languages in college, sir. It's my passion." She said this, barely believing her own words. The man who owned the hotel she worked at, the man who everyone talked about, was standing right in front of her, speaking to her. Why was he asking about her? There was a pause, and then Ethan asked, "What's your name?" "Emily Torres," she replied automatically, her voice shaking. "Emily," he repeated softly, testing the sound of her name. He then nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time. Enjoy your lunch." And just like that, he turned and walked out of the room. Emily was left in stunned silence, her heart racing as she tried to process the interaction. Why had he stopped to ask her about speaking Dutch? Was it just curiosity, or was there something more? She sat there, unable to focus on her lunch, unable to push away the thoughts that kept swirling in her head. That day she returned to work with a new sense of purpose, though still unsure of what it all meant. But the next day, Emily's life was about to change in ways she never imagined. As she arrived at work and clocked in, her supervisor called her aside. "Human Resources wants to see you," the supervisor said, his voice laced with a hint of unease. Emily felt her stomach twist. What did I do wrong, she thought, her heart sinking. She walked down the hall, her steps echoing in the empty space. When she entered the HR office, the director, Mrs. Valerie Green, looked up with a smile. "Come in, Emily. Sit down." Confused, Emily did as instructed, her mind racing. What could this be about? "I received a very unusual request this morning," Mrs. Green began. "Mr. Morgan has asked that you be reassigned, effective immediately." Emily blinked, trying to process the words. "Reassigned? What does that mean?" "You'll be moving into a newly created position," Mrs. Green continued, "Assistant in International Guest Relations. You'll be working with high-profile guests, particularly those who don't speak English. This role comes with a significant salary increase, about 3 times your current pay." Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. 3 times her current pay? And working with international guests, translating for diplomats and CEOs? She was still reeling from the shock when Mrs. Green added, "Mr. Morgan says your talents are wasted where you are. He believes you're capable of much more. You start today. He'd like to see you in his office after lunch." Emily stood in front of the mirror in the staff dressing room, staring at her reflection with disbelief. No longer clad in her usual housekeeping uniform, she was now dressed in a tailored navy skirt, a silk blouse, and soft leather heels. Clothes that fit her perfectly, almost as if someone had studied her closely and knew exactly what she would need. The name tag that now adorned her chest read, International Guest Relations Associate. Her mind was still reeling from the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Just 2 days ago, she had been mopping the floors of the Atoria Grand Hotel, invisible to the world. Now she was stepping into a new life, one where she was expected to meet diplomats, CEOs, and influential people, interpreting for them in multiple languages. It all felt surreal, like she had walked into someone else's life, a life she never believed she could belong to. As she adjusted her skirt, she tried to calm her nerves. This wasn't just about the money, though the salary increase was undeniably life-changing. It was about the recognition, the opportunity to step out of the shadows and into the light. But even as her mind raced, doubts lingered. Why her? What had Ethan Morgan seen in a hotel cleaner speaking Dutch during her lunch break? And more than that, why had he chosen her, of all people? The door to the staff dressing room clicked open, and one of the bellhops, a young man named Greg, gave her a quick nod as he passed by. "Looking sharp, Emily," he said with a friendly smile. "Thanks, Greg," she replied, though her voice sounded almost foreign to her own ears. She wasn't sure who this new version of herself was yet. Her heels clicked on the polished tile floor as she walked down the hall, every step echoing in her ears. She passed the golden chandeliers and velvet carpets she had cleaned countless times before, but today, everything felt different. The elevator doors opened, and Emily hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside, the weight of the moment heavy on her chest. She pressed the button for the top floor, where Ethan Morgan's office was located, swinging between anticipation and anxiety churn in her stomach. As the elevator ascended, she watched the numbers slowly tick upward. Each floor seemed to pass in a blur, and before she knew it, the elevator stopped, and the doors opened to reveal a gleaming hallway. She stepped out and was immediately greeted by a doorman who held the door to the executive suite open for her. His eyes briefly lingered on her, and for the first time since she started at the hotel, Emily felt as though she wasn't just another part of the furniture. She was seen. She took a deep breath and walked down the hallway to the suite. Outside the office, a bellhop nodded and opened the door for her. As she entered, her heart pounded in her chest. Ethan Morgan was standing near the panoramic window, his back to her, his phone in one hand, his gaze fixed on the skyline below. When he turned and saw her, his expression softened, and a flicker of approval crossed his face. "You look the part," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. He set the phone down on his desk and gestured for her to take a seat across from him. "Thank you, sir," Emily said quietly, still processing the enormity of the situation. She lowered herself into the sleek leather chair, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her. Ethan's gaze was steady, but there was a kindness in his eyes that helped Emily relax. For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away, and all that mattered was the conversation between them. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked, his voice lowering slightly. Emily hesitated before responding, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty coursing through her veins. "Like I woke up in someone else's life," she said, her voice betraying her inner turmoil. "I've never been in a place like this before." Ethan smiled faintly, as if understanding exactly what she meant. "Maybe you're just waking up in your own life," he said, his tone thoughtful. For a brief moment, they both sat in silence, a quiet understanding hanging in the air between them. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Let me be honest," he began, his voice softer now. "I didn't create this position for anyone else. I created it for you, because I saw something in you." Emily's stomach fluttered at his words. Her pulse quickened, and she couldn't help but feel a small, unexpected warmth bloom in her chest. But she still had doubts. She had been overlooked by so many, dismissed because of her background, her circumstances. She wasn't sure she could believe in herself, let alone in what Ethan was saying. "I heard you speak Dutch," he continued, and his voice grew more serious. "I didn't just hear a language. I heard someone who understands people, someone who connects with others on a level that most people can't. That's why I wanted you on my team. I believe you have what it takes to be a key player in this company." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had always believed in the power of empathy, in understanding people's nuances and connecting with them in ways that transcended words. But she had never considered that it could be a skill that someone would value. "You're not hiring me for etiquette," she said, her voice almost incredulous. "You're hiring me for empathy, for instinct." Ethan's smile was warm, almost sad. "Everything else can be taught. What you have, what you bring to the table, can't be taught. You're a natural. I need someone who understands the nuances of culture and human interaction, not just someone who can speak another language." Emily felt the weight of his words sink in, and she could feel her confidence slowly growing. This wasn't just about speaking Dutch or being good at her job. It was about the way she could see the world, the way she could understand people, something she had always taken for granted. Ethan stood up and walked over to a small bar in the corner of the office. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked, his tone easy. "Yes, please," Emily replied, her voice steady now. As he poured the coffee, they exchanged glances, and in that moment, Emily felt a shift. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of something new, something big. When the coffee was ready, they sat across from each other, sipping their drinks in comfortable silence. Emily felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She had always been an outsider, always the one on the outside looking in. But now, for the first time, she felt like she had a seat at the table. "I need your help this afternoon," Ethan said, breaking the silence. There's a group of Dutch investors coming in. They're considering financing our first European expansion. I need someone who understands both the language and the culture. Emily's breath hitched in her chest. This was her chance. This was what she had worked for. I'll do my best, she said, her voice firm. Ethan gave a small nod of approval. I know you will. The next few weeks seemed to fly by in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and late-night strategy sessions. Emily was no longer the woman who had once scrubbed the marble floors of the Atoria Grand Hotel. She had evolved into a key player in the hotel's international expansion project. She was now Ethan's right hand, his interpreter, advisor, and, increasingly, someone who seemed indispensable. Her world had expanded in ways she never thought possible, and she was learning to navigate this new life one step at a time. With each day, her confidence grew. She was no longer just the woman cleaning the rooms. She was Emily, the international guest relations associate, the woman who had saved a multi-million-dollar deal with her ability to understand people and cultures. She could feel it in the way she carried herself, in the way the hotel staff now looked at her, not as the invisible employee, but as someone who had earned her place at the table. But despite the professional transformation, Emily couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered in her mind. She knew the world she had stepped into was far from perfect. There were unspoken rules, and she was learning them. But sometimes she wondered if she belonged. She had worked so hard to get here, but the fear of being discovered, of being seen as someone who didn't fit, never fully left her. One evening, after another long day filled with back-to-back meetings, Ethan invited her to dinner. This time, it wasn't at the hotel but at his home. The invitation was unexpected, but something inside Emily urged her to accept. She had never been in a place like this before, and part of her wanted to experience it, to see what it was like to be truly seen by someone who wasn't just a boss or an investor. As she drove to his house, the car ride was quiet. She tried to focus on the road, but her thoughts kept wandering back to the transformation she had undergone. How had it happened so quickly? Just a few weeks ago, she had been living in Queens, struggling to make ends meet. Now she was dining with billionaires and sitting in meetings where her opinion mattered. When Emily arrived, Ethan greeted her at the door. His home was nothing like she had expected. It wasn't the cold, modern mansion that most people imagined when they thought of a billionaire's residence. Instead, it was warm and inviting, filled with books, photographs, and the faint scent of cedarwood. It felt like a place where someone truly lived, a space full of memories, not just wealth. You look beautiful, Ethan said, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. Emily felt a blush creep up her neck at the compliment. She had always been self-conscious, especially when it came to her appearance, but tonight she felt different. Maybe it was the way Ethan looked at her, or maybe it was the confidence that had started to blossom within her. Thank you, she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Ethan smiled and led her inside. Dinner is almost ready. Let me take your coat. As he hung her coat in the hallway, Emily noticed how comfortable and relaxed he seemed. He wasn't the cold, distant billionaire who had built an empire. He was just Ethan, someone who had experienced life's hardships and had made his way to the top through hard work and determination. You're not using a chef? Emily asked, half joking, as she looked at him preparing the meal in the kitchen. Ethan laughed, and for the first time since she had met him, Emily heard him laugh fully, genuinely. I like to cook. It's the one thing that keeps me grounded. They sat down to eat together, the conversation flowing easily between them. For the first time, they were not just boss and employee. They were two people who had both fought their way through life's challenges. Ethan spoke about his father, a janitor who had raised him alone and whose dream had been to open a hotel. Ethan had made that dream come true, but he hadn't shared it with anyone until now. Emily shared stories of her mother, who had passed away several years ago, and how she kept her mother's memory alive by following the dream she had never been able to fully pursue. Every step Emily took, every small victory, felt like she was telling her mother, I'm doing it, Mom. I'm still standing. The evening was quiet, filled with meaningful conversation, and for the first time, Emily felt like she wasn't alone. She felt understood. Later that night, they sat on the porch, a soft rain beginning to fall. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but it was the quiet between them that felt the most significant. Ethan broke the silence. "I'm not sure when it happened," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as someone I simply admire and started seeing you as someone I don't want to imagine this life without." Emily's breath caught halfway, her heart racing. She wanted to speak, to tell him how she felt, but words seemed inadequate. She had spent her entire life trying to be seen, to be understood. But now that she was finally being seen, she didn't know how to respond. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "this is real for me too. But I've worked so hard to be taken seriously. If anyone finds out, they'll say what they always say, that I don't belong here, that I only got this far because of something other than my mind." Ethan reached out and gently took her hand. "You and I both know the truth," he said, his voice steady. "And if you choose to walk away to protect what you've built, I'll respect that. But if you choose to stay, I promise no one will ever doubt your worth. Not while I'm still breathing." The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so many years fighting for respect and recognition, and now here was someone offering her exactly that. But there was still so much uncertainty, so many fears she had yet to overcome. Yet in that moment, with his hand in hers, Emily knew one thing for certain. She wasn't walking away. "I'm not walking away," she said softly, her voice steady. The next morning, the entire hotel was buzzing with news. The Emperor Group had closed a record-breaking deal to expand into Europe, and Emily's work was cited by investors as crucial to the success of the deal. Her hard work and dedication had paid off in ways she never imagined. But what made headlines across hospitality blogs was the announcement that stunned everyone. Ethan Morgan, the notoriously private mogul, had publicly introduced Emily, not just as his business partner, but as the woman he was building a future with. Critics whispered, gossip swirled, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that Emily had finally found a place where she truly belonged. She wasn't just another part of the furniture anymore. She was seen. She was needed. And more importantly, she had earned her place in the world she had always dreamed of. As weeks passed, Emily's new life unfolded with unexpected challenges and remarkable growth. What had started as an act of kindness, helping Ethan with the Dutch-speaking investors, had turned into a full-scale partnership, both in business and in life. She wasn't just working at the hotel anymore. She was influencing deals, shaping strategies, and navigating the complexities of international business. But the weight of her transformation was not without its difficulties. Every morning, as she looked into the mirror of her hotel suite, Emily often wondered if it was all real. How had she gone from mopping floors to attending board meetings? The recognition she now received was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had worked hard for this. Yet the sense of disbelief lingered. The transition into her new role was seamless, but the path to acceptance, both from others and herself, was not as smooth. The hotel's staff, who once saw her as a lowly cleaner, now treated her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Some of her old colleagues, though, had begun to resent her quick ascent. There were whispers, sideways glances, and the feeling of eyes watching her every move. Despite the occasional unease, Emily felt a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a woman who cleaned hotel rooms. She was Emily, the director of international guest relations, an invaluable asset to the hotel's expansion plans. But there was still something stirring inside her, a feeling that she had to prove herself even more. Ethan noticed the quiet tension in her demeanor. One afternoon, after a particularly long series of meetings, he invited her out to dinner, as he had done on several occasions before. But this time, it wasn't just about a casual evening out. This time, the invitation was an acknowledgement of all that she had achieved, but also a recognition of the unspoken weight that Emily carried. The dinner was simple, held in a quiet corner of the hotel's private dining room. Ethan, ever the enigmatic and reserved figure, chose not to talk about business for once. Instead, they shared stories about their past. Ethan about his humble beginnings, growing up with a father who worked as a janitor and instilled in him the importance of integrity. Emily spoke about her mother, the sacrifices she had made, and how each step of her journey felt like she was living for two people. I used to feel like a ghost in my own life, Emily said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass. I would wake up every day, go through the motions, and wonder if anyone would ever truly see me. Ethan looked at her, his gaze softening. You've been seen, Emily. By me. By everyone who's worked with you. You've earned your place here, and it's not just because of the languages you speak, it's because of who you are. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe it. She had earned her place. And while it had come in the most unexpected of ways, it was hers. That evening, something shifted between them. It wasn't just the connection they had built as colleagues, nor was it simply the undeniable chemistry that had always been there. It was a moment of mutual understanding. They were two people who had struggled, fought, and learned from their pasts. And now they had found something in each other, a partnership that transcended business, a connection that was built on respect and shared experiences. As the night drew to a close, Ethan took Emily's hand gently, his voice low. I know this is new for both of us, but I want you to know that you have a place here, with me, not just as a business partner, but as someone I want in my life. I think we're both ready for something real. Emily's heart fluttered, but she held his gaze steadily. I'm ready, Ethan, for what's next, for whatever this is. The following days were filled with the hum of the hotel's expansion plans and their growing partnership. But for Emily, the transformation wasn't just about business deals or high-profile meetings. It was about learning to trust herself, learning to stand in a world where she had always been invisible, and finally realizing that she belonged, not just in this luxurious hotel world, but in the future she was now building alongside Ethan. Their relationship deepened. Ethan continued to support Emily as she navigated her new role, and Emily helped Ethan as they made decisions about their future together. Their partnership wasn't just professional, it was personal too. They shared moments of quiet understanding, exchanged hopes and dreams, and began to build a life together outside the confines of the corporate world. But their success wasn't just their own. As the weeks turned into months, Emily began to realize that the most important part of her journey was not the money, the title, or even the recognition. It was the opportunity to help others. Through her work at the hotel and her partnership with Ethan, she found herself mentoring young women who were in the same position she once was, unsure, invisible, and waiting for an opportunity. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the hotel's conference room after a particularly successful presentation, she received a message from her old professor, Dr. Peter van Linden, her Dutch mentor. The message simply read, Emily, I heard about your success. You're doing incredible things. Keep it up. You have the world at your feet. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she read the message. She had never expected to hear from him again, let alone receive his praise. The realization that the journey she had taken, struggling, learning, and growing, had led her to this moment was overwhelming. She had achieved something beyond her wildest dreams, and yet there was so much more to come. The next day, Ethan surprised her with a gift, an old map of the city, one that was drawn in the early 1900s when the hotel was first built. He presented it to her as a reminder of how far they had come and the legacy they were now building together. The map wasn't just a piece of history, it was a symbol of everything they had worked for, everything they were creating together. As Emily stood beside Ethan, looking at the map, she realized that this was only the beginning. Her life had changed, yes, but the change wasn't just external. It had transformed who she was at her core. She had found her place in the world not through luck, but through hard work, dedication, and the courage to take risks. And with Ethan by her side, she knew that they could build a future that was not just about success, but about leaving a legacy, one that would inspire others, just as she had been inspired. As time passed, the impact of Emily's transformation rippled through the Atoria Grand Hotel, and more importantly, through her own life. The professional success she had achieved with Ethan, her growing influence, and the respect she had earned in the industry were all tangible markers of how far she had come. But beneath the surface, Emily knew that something deeper had shifted within her. A realization that was no longer about surviving day to day, but truly living. For so long, Emily had been defined by the hardships she had endured. The early mornings, the late nights, the debts, the loneliness. All of it had shaped her into someone who simply did what she needed to do to get by. But now, as she walked through the hotel's gleaming corridors, her confidence no longer came from simply fitting in or doing the bare minimum. It came from knowing her worth, from understanding that she had earned every step of her success. Ethan's presence in her life had helped her see that. What had started as a professional partnership, business deals, foreign investors, cultural translations, had blossomed into something more profound. In every conversation, every meeting, every shared decision, Emily began to understand that her voice mattered, not just in the office, but in the world. Ethan respected her intellect, her resilience, and her compassion, and for the first time in her life, Emily respected herself in the same way. Their relationship was still in its early stages, but it was becoming clear to both of them that what they shared wasn't just about business. It was about partnership, mutual admiration, and a genuine connection that transcended their professional roles. They talked late into the evening, not about work or future projects, but about their dreams, their fears, and the things they had sacrificed to get where they were. One particular evening, after another successful meeting with a group of investors, Ethan took Emily to a quiet restaurant in the city. As they shared a bottle of wine, Ethan's eyes held a seriousness that Emily hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking a lot about how this whole thing started," he began, his voice low. "About you, about us." Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "What do you mean?" "Not just how we met, but what it all means now. What it could mean for the future." He paused as if collecting his thoughts. "I don't think either of us expected this to turn into something more than just work." Emily smiled softly, taking a sip of her wine. "No, I didn't, but I'm glad it did." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I want you to know that I see you, for everything you are, everything you've worked for. I don't think I've told you enough how much I admire you, how much I appreciate what you've done, not just for me, but for everyone." The sincerity in his words made Emily's heart race. It wasn't just admiration, it was respect, it was partnership, and most importantly, it was love. A love that had slowly crept up on both of them, unnoticed until it was already there, deep and real. She reached out and placed her hand on his, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "I never thought I would be here, sitting in this restaurant with someone like you, but I'm glad I am." Ethan's gaze softened. "We've both come a long way, haven't we?" Emily nodded, the weight of her journey heavy in her chest. "Yes, we have." The next few months were filled with new challenges and opportunities. As the director of international strategy, Emily played a pivotal role in the hotel's expansion into Europe. She wasn't just managing foreign guests anymore. She was overseeing international negotiations, making high-stakes decisions, and becoming an integral part of the hotel's future. Yet despite the whirlwind of professional success, she never lost sight of what mattered most. Emily began to mentor younger women at the hotel, women who, like her, had once felt invisible in a world dominated by powerful men. She shared her story with them, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to resilience and determination. She wanted them to know that they too could rise beyond their circumstances. But it wasn't just about helping others. It was about Emily finding peace with her past and letting go of the guilt and fear that had once held her back. She had spent so many years working to survive, but now she was living, not just for herself, but for everyone she could help along the way. Her work with Ethan grew deeper, both personally and professionally. They continued to face new challenges together, making decisions that would shape not only the future of the hotel chain, but their own futures as well. But now they did so as equals. Emily no longer saw herself as the cleaning lady who made good. She was Emily, an entrepreneur, a leader, a woman with a future as bright as the city lights outside her window. One night, as they stood together on the balcony of Ethan's penthouse, watching the lights of the city twinkle below, Emily realized just how far she had come. The woman she had once been, The woman who lived in fear, who was defined by her struggles, was no more. The woman standing beside Ethan now was someone who had earned her place, someone who had fought for every inch of success she had achieved, and she was only just getting started. I used to think the city lights were just pretty, she said softly, her eyes scanning the skyline. But now they remind me of all the possibilities, all the things I can still do. Ethan smiled, his arm around her shoulder. And you'll do them all. I have no doubt. Emily looked up at him, her heart full. I couldn't have done it without you. Ethan turned to face her, his expression warm. We're in this together, Emily. Always. As they stood there, watching the world unfold before them, Emily knew one thing for certain. The future was wide open, and she was ready to embrace it. The woman who had once scrubbed floors now stood at the threshold of a life she had built on her own terms, a life filled with love,